shortening of time zone. My name is Milton Kramer. When I mention the name Kramer, it brings in a whole subject about the Kramer family. And they are very much, their lives are linked to Lubavitch. And I'm going to explain to you how and why. My grandfather, Moshe Eliezer Kramer Halevi, was a student in the Lubavitch yeshiva in Russia. And at that time, also the seventh Rebbe, Reb Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, was also a student there at that time. So we're going back to around 1860s or 1870s, maybe 1860s, I don't know the exact date. So my grandfather knew Reb Yosef Yitzchak. So when Reb Yosef Yitzchak became the Rebbe in 1920, after his father, Shalom Ber, passed away, he became the Rebbe. And he wrote a letter, he knew my grandfather, and he wrote a letter to the effect that, you know, many people, Lubavitchers from Russia, from different towns, came to America because it was very poor over there. They came to America, and there were many Lubavitchers in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, in major cities. He said, you know, you have to start a lay organization of Lubavitchers. And that's why, because the Rebbe requested it, my grandfather, Moshe Eliezer Halevi, he established and formed Agudas Chasidei Chabad, which is actually a New York corporation and is the legal entity of Lubavitch worldwide. It still exists today at 770. So you could see that the origin of Lubavitch in America started with my grandfather and Yosef Yitzchak, of course. Now, talking about the seventh Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak, he came here in 1929 because he came here to thank the American public, and particularly Lubavitchers in different towns. He went to all the towns where they were, to thank them for getting him released from the Russian jail.
There is Reb Shmuel Levittin sitting, Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson, Senator Philip Kleinfeld, Commissioner Herland representing Mayor LaGuardia, and Attorney Sam Kramer.
With the Russians had levied a death sentence against him because he was practicing Yadus underground, because it was a communist country and they didn't allow religions. But he did it underground with people, and they had bris milah, and they had, so what happened was he came here to thank everybody in 1929. In 1929, I was 10 years old. And of course, my father and his brothers and his sisters were always involved in Lubavitch because they had that background from their father. So they were involved in Malava Malkas, preparing Malava Malkas, which the Rebbe had every Shabbos, Motzoi Shabbos. And one time there was a Malava Malka in my uncle Sam Kramer's house, at which the Lubavitcher Rebbe attended. And my father, we lived in Brooklyn, and he slept me over to Manhattan, you know, to be with the Yithia and see the Rebbe. And of course, there was a lot of dancing and Rikudim and Lubavitch and Rikudim and all that stuff. And finally, my father said to me, he gave me a little nudge, he said, "Zing epis." So I sang something, and there's a video, an old video, which shows me singing at that particular Malava Malka.
Cheder soll verstehen, was geht sein. In der Video gehe ich euch geben einen kleinen Kitzer. Und was gerät, ihr verstehen ein bisschen mehr, was geht sein. Ihr wisst, dass der Friedrich Rebbe ist gekommen in Amerika zweimal. Einmal ist der Friedrich Rebbe gewesen in Tafresh Tzadik. Friedrich Rebbe ist jemand nicht gewesen in einer Wheelchair. Friedrich Rebbe ist gekommen sehr hoch, er ist gekommen mit der Hittel. Und jemals, in jenem Mal, Tafresh Tzadik, wenn er ist gekommen, der Friedrich Rebbe ist herumgegangen zu danken alle Chassidim, für ihm helfen nachzudenken. In Tafresh Peizayin. Weil die Chassidim haben stark gestuckt in Russland, als wir soll rauslassen der Friedrich Rebbe. Sein Vetter, Rabbi Craymar, Sam Kramer, ist gewesen ein größer Lawyer, was hat gehalten Milchames in Washington zu machen sicher, als wir lassen mal raus. Und der Pfarrer ist sein Onkel, sein Vetter, gegangen mit der Friedrich Rebbe zu Washington und zu Chicago, zu machen sicher, zu danken alle Lubavitcher Chassidim und alle government officials. Er hat gehabt spezielle connections, wenn der Friedrich Rebbe aus jemand gekommen, ist gewesen bei einem Lava Malka, was geht in einem Video, was ein Tat hat ihm gestuckt zu singen und er hat gesungen für der Friedrich Rebbe.
So that was in 1929, I was 10 years old. So you can figure out how old I am today, if you're good in arithmetic. Then what happened was the Rebbe, and also he went to the White House. My father was the president of Agudas Chassidic Chabad, because my grandfather died in 1925, and my father, being the oldest son, became the president of Agudas Chassidic Chabad. And he accompanied Yosef Yitzchok Schneerson to the White House to thank President Hoover for his helping him get out of Russia. Getting out of Russia is a very interesting side story, because I want to talk about Hashgacha Pratis, which I think all you young fellows know about, or you should know about. Hashem is guiding all of us. Okay? And there's Hashgacha Pratis. So what do I mean by that as it refers to Yosef Yitzchok Schneerson, the Rebbe? When he was freed from Russia, they told him, we want you to, we demand that you give up your Russian citizenship, and he had to give them the passport, and don't ever come back to this country, because if you do, we're going to kill you. So he had no country. So from Russia at that time, this was in 1928, he went to Riga in Latvia, because there was a Lubavitcher yeshiva there, and there were Lubavitchers over there, and that's where he stayed. Okay? Now let's fast forward to World War II. The Gestapo is looking for the Rebbe in Warsaw. They want to kill him. But due to pressure from the United States and my uncle, the lawyer, and his fellow lawyers, they were able to get a special visa for the Rebbe to come to this country. So he had the visa, but how is he going to leave Europe? He doesn't have Russian citizenship anymore. He can't go back to Russia. He can't go back to the United States. They didn't let Jews come in. Hashgacha Pratis. He had that Latvian citizenship. So they took him to the Latvian border, and he went into Latvia with his passport, and that's what saved him. That's Hashgacha Pratis, because the Russians who wanted to kill him the end of the story was, because they wanted to kill him, he was saved. Then during the war, he was saved. There's a book, a special book written, Rescued from the Reich, and it tells you all the details of how the Rebbe was rescued by German soldiers, no less. And that occurred in 1940. He came to this country, and he said when he left the boat, he said, America is nicht anders. In English, America is no different. What did he mean by that? He meant that in America, the Jews are not observant. Okay, there are Jews, there are some observant ones, but very small minority. And he meant that America is not different from Russia, from Europe and Russia. Because as long as there are Jews here, we can tell them about Yadus, and they will join and they will become religious. And that's exactly what happened. He set it up that way, and today, to this day, with the Rebbe that followed him, Mנחem and his son-in-law, he pursued it further with the shluchim all over the world and in the 50 United States, and they are bringing Jews forward. Okay, so let me see what else did I miss here. Another side thing was, interestingly enough, that in 1942, when I had to go into the service because of the World War II, the Rebbe, Yosef Tשעז, who was alive at that time, and he had just come to this country in 1940, he gave me a bracha. And the bracha was very simple. He said, you know, you're going into the service and you're not going to be able to find any kosher food, of course. Today, if you're in the army, you can get kosher food. Not at that time, not 1942. He said, and Shabbos, look, there's a war going on, you're going to have to work. He said, look, you'll have to do these things and you have permission to do those things. But, if you want to come back, you have to keep your tefillin with you all the time and use it. And that's exactly what I did. And because of that bracha, that's why I'm here. So there's a connection between Milton Kramer and the Rebbe, because this is a personal situation. And as far as a side story about the tefillin, was when I was putting on the tefillin in the Air Force, these guys, I was the only Jew in the outfit of 263 fellows, and they never met a Jew before, because most of them were farmers. They came from Minnesota, Iowa, Idaho. They didn't know anything about Jews. So when I was putting on, they said, "What are you doing? You're taking your blood pressure?" I said, "No, I'm Jewish." And so one of the fellows said, "Don't tell me that you're Jewish. You cannot be Jewish. Why? Because you don't have horns." Now you know that there is a statue of Moshe in the I think it's in the Italian Museum over there, and I forget where, in which he showed with horns, carne, you know. So these Goyim figured that if you don't have horns, you're not Jewish. But after a while, I became one of the leaders of the outfit because of the side story. And I was with them 3.5 years. Also, as a personal note, when I was married in 1949, Yosef Yitzchak, who was not feeling too well, didn't come to the wedding, but he sent a letter, and he sent his son-in-law Mנחem. I have the pictures of it. He was at our wedding, and that's what happened. That's the connection between Lubavitch, always. And right now, there are 4 generations that are alive and who are following the path of Lubavitch, which the main message is Ahavas Yisrael. And now we're going to show a video which gives more details of what I spoke about.
Euch für sein Chasana, der Friedrich Rebbe hat nicht gekannt kommen, es ist schon gewesen gleich vor Tauschen Jud, gleich vor der Friedrich Rebbe ins Tal geworden, gleich vor unser Rebbe Messias, hat der Friedrich Rebbe nicht nur, hat der Friedrich Rebbe geschickt ein Brief, der Friedrich Rebbe hat geschickt ein Representative zu sein Chasana. So vorstellen ihm, der Friedrich Rebbe geschickt unser Rebbe.
Cheder Ohr Kramer, who started this whole thing about Lubavitch in America, he came from a small town before he went to Lubavitch Yeshiva, which is called Kuranitz, which is now a country called Belarus in the Russian thing. That small town had about 400 or 500 Jews, maybe 600, and there were at least that I heard about. There were like 4 Nuschari shuls in that small town. So he came from that background. And what they did in Kuranitz is he had Chaverim that he learned with. He learned with Moshe, with Yaakov, with Yitzchak, with different people. He learned different sects and all that. In fact, he was so learned and he was learning all the time that when he came to America and he started a business, the pants business, men's pants, he was at the cutting table where you cut the pants, and he had a Gemara right there open while he was cutting the pants. So that's the extent. So I want to tell you about the learning that took place. He came to America, and he knew that Kuranitz is a very small and poor town. So he had all these kavrusas that he learned with there, but he came to America and he started a business. So he kept writing his kavrusa people that he knew, and he said, look, you can't make any headway in Kuranitz. It's very poor. Come to America and all that. So they answered him, what do you mean come to America? With what? I mean, we have no money to take a ship or all that. Don't worry about it. He sent them money, and about, to my knowledge, about 25 or so people came through. Took a couple of years. When they arrived, he said, you know, we have to do something about a siyum. We have to make a siyum in this country of the Shas. Siyum HaShas, not a siyum of a Masechta. He said, and that was before Rabbi Shapiro started the Daf Yomi. So he said, you know, look, Rabbi Yitzchak, you learned with Rabbi Moshe, you learned the Bavas. And you, Rabbi Yaakov, and who else, you learned the Masechta of the Noshim. And so on, and he assigned different people to different Sidorim. And he said, at the end of the period, when each group is finished, we're going to have a Siyum HaShas in New York, because that's where he lived, because all the people who came from overseas, the immigrants, they wound up on the east side. And there was a shul called Tzemach Tzedek, which was a Nuchsahari shul. So they had this Siyum HaShas, and it's recorded in the newspaper. The first Siyum HaShas in the United States of America. Please remember that it was Moshe Eliezer Kramer who did that. He supervised it. So that has to do with him. As far as my Uncle Sam Kramer was mentioned here, he was a lawyer, and he was very much involved in making sure that the Rebbe was saved from Poland during the war, because the Gestapo were looking all over for him. In fact, if you read the book, Rescue from the Reich, there's a story in there where these German soldiers working for the Gestapo were looking for the Rebbe, and they saw some Hasidim walking in the street. So they said, where's the Rebbe? So they said to him, we're not going to tell you where the Rebbe is, because you're going to kill him. So that's basically what happened. Finally, due to the head of the security the German army, or the German Defense Department, used to go to college and university here in this country. Most of the Germans did. And he had friends here from college. And these friends contacted him and said, you know, you have to do something about this great Rebbe. You know, he lahavdil, to the Jewish people, lahavdil, he's like the Pope. You know, I mean, he says, you've got to get him out of there or they're going to kill him. So this fellow, his name was Apuar, I think, he assigned a very close, one of his majors, said, I want you to take a couple of men, find the Rebbe, and get him out of there. And of course, they did that. And the Rebbe didn't want to talk to any German soldiers, but finally he got word from Riga that if the German soldiers come to take you out of Poland, go with them. And he and some members of his family were able to leave, and they went to Latvia and they were rescued, and they saved their lives that way. So that happens to be a very interesting point about how the Rebbe was saved, and I told you about the Ashkar Brothers situation. I could tell you about certain things. When I was in the service during World War II, I had mentioned before I was the only Jew in the organization of 263 men, and they never met a Jew before. So what happened was that after the war, many years after, we had reunions, and it was always in September. And there was one reunion I didn't attend, and because it was Rosh Hashanah. Sure enough, I got a call from one of my buddies. He says, Milton, we didn't see you at the reunion. You always are there. Why weren't you there? Are you feeling okay? I said, yeah, no, I'm fine. I said, it's my Jewish holiday. It's your Jewish holiday? Why didn't you tell us? He said, from now on, when we meet and we plan the following year, please bring a calendar, and we're not going to meet on your Jewish holidays. These are guys that never met a Jew before. And they really helped me, because usually there was a Shabbos involved, and they helped me, you know, because I didn't go with them on Shabbos when they went to different places. So that's the story with that. Other than that, I can't, you know, I don't want to burden you with other stories, but I do want to tell you the bottom line of all of this is that the Kramer family, all the generations, 6 generations, are conducting themselves in the philosophy and the view of the Balatanya and the previous Rebbe's, all what they have written about how to conduct oneself in life and what's important and what's not important. And thank God, and we thank Hashem for that privilege. Thank you.
Do you have any stories that happened with tefillin? You said you had to wear tefillin in the army. Was there anything ever that?
Well, I mentioned that these guys that didn't they never met a Jew. They saw me putting it on. They said, "Well, you're taking your blood pressure."
Besides for that, was there some other story that there were shells?
Oh, yeah. It's a very interesting story. So all these fellas, remember, they didn't met a Jew, and many of them were atheists because they were farmers. They never went to a religious institution. They never did any religious studies. So there's a famous saying that you'll run across as you get educated, that there are no atheists in the foxhole. In other words, during the war, when you're in a foxhole to try and save yourself because the bombs are falling, the atheist is going to say, God save me. And that's exactly what happened. There was a period of time, a couple of weeks, when Rommel was like 4 blocks away from us. And we had to live underground because he was bombing us. And sure enough, we were living in trenches. And there was a guy there was a guy that was crawling on the ground. Where's Kramer? They said, well, he's in that trench. He said, so he crawls over to the trench. He said, what do you get into one of the trenches? You're going to get killed. He said, I got to find Kramer. He's over there. He finds Kramer and he said, hey, Kramer, please put on those straps because we'll never get out of here alive. That's the story. That was from an atheist. No atheist in a foxhole. All right, they got the sound good.
Life?
And all your endeavors. Good health. Okay, you got to come together.
Yossi, warte eine Sekunde. I want to get a picture of you together. Doiber, Doiber, stop.
Future leaders here. Okay, I'm shaking the hand of future leaders. Very good. All right. Yes, okay.
I don't know how we can do it with them. They just stand over there.
Future leaders, here we are. Shaking the hand of future leaders. Yeah.